Welcome back to Doctrines 1 at Alaska Bible College. Again, I'm your teacher, Dr. Benjamin Olson. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the text and the manuscripts of the New Testament. First and foremost, we need to acknowledge, just like with the Old Testament, we do not have any original autographs or original manuscripts from the New Testament authors. Instead, what we have are copies. Those manuscripts were transmitted from the time of the original writings to today. In comparison to the Old Testament, however, the Old Testament, we had very few manuscripts that were meticulously copied and very, very close to the originals as verified by the Dead Sea Scrolls. With the New Testament, however, we don't look at pristine individual copies. Instead, we have a vast multitude of existing manuscripts. Literally thousands of New Testament manuscripts preserved by the Church between the 2nd and 15th centuries A.D. Because of the vast number of manuscripts, the New Testament is undoubtedly the best attested to book from the ancient world because of those vast number of manuscripts. For comparison, most ancient texts from that time usually only have one or two, maybe if it's very well attested to, a dozen or so manuscripts that have survived to us today. And many times the more manuscripts there are, the more difference there is in those writings. And so we're talking literally thousands of manuscripts that have been preserved for us for the New Testament. Most manuscripts do not contain the entire New Testament because a hand-produced copy of the whole New Testament would have been bulky for practical use. So we have four categories of generally allowed, were generally followed when making copies of the New Testament. You had the four Gospels, you had the Acts and the general epistles, you had the Pauline epistles, and the book of Revelation. So let's talk about the types of manuscripts that there were. First, you have the Papyri. The Papyri are the oldest manuscripts that we have. The earliest manuscripts of the New Testament were written on the material called papyrus. Those are designated with a P and then a number after it. Then you have a group of manuscripts called the uncials. The uncials, U-N-C-I-A-L, uncial, just simply means uppercase letters. Uppercase letters, Greek was written in both uppercase and lowercase letters, and the earliest manuscripts that we have 362 of these early manuscripts were written in uppercase letters. So originally the writings were in uppercase, and then eventually we have what's called the minuscules or the cursives. The minuscules script was a development of the cursive hand and differs from the uncials by its use of smaller letters. The small letters could be written more quickly and use less space. The minuscules did not make their debut until the 9th century A.D. And are obviously of far less value in and of themselves because of their late date, that according to Lightfoot. So let's talk about some of these important manuscripts that we have. The Papyri. These date all the way back to the 2nd and 3rd century. Notice 2nd century, we're talking about literally dozens of years after the original writing, not hundreds. There are 88 papyri manuscripts of portions of the New Testament. These very early and important witnesses of the New Testament include most of the New Testament when put together. Obviously, they're fragments, and so you have just some of them are very, very small, sometimes only containing a dozen or so words on it, but we can tell that it's originally from the New Testament. The oldest of these include one called P52. According to most scholars, the closest copy to an autograph is a papyrus manuscript designated P52, Papyrus 52, dated around 110 to 125, containing a few verses of John 18. It's verses 31 to 34 on the front and 37 to 38 on the back. They were written front and back. This fragment only 20 to 30 years removed from the original writing of John's Gospel. So this very well, P52, the fragment that we have, very well could have been copied from the original. We don't know that. There's no way to verify that, but definitely very, very, very early in the manuscript history there. You have P87, which dates around 125, contains a few verses of Philemon. P77 contains a few verses of Matthew. P32 has a portion of Titus 1 and 2. P45 contains portions of all four Gospels and Acts, obviously considerably longer. P46, this is around 200 AD, has almost all of Paul's epistles and the book of Hebrews. P47 contains Revelation 9 through 17. P66, dated around 175, one of the earliest witnesses in the New Testament that is almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. P72 dates around the 3rd century and is earliest copy that included Jude and 1st and 2nd Peter. And then P75 around 175 to 225, which contains large portions of Luke 3 through John 15. All right, so let's talk then about the unctuals. The unctuals were written on vellum. All right, a little bit of a different, or sometimes called parchment. This the most important manuscripts of these date all the way back to the 4th century, or 300 AD to 400 AD. These ones are considered very important because they're mostly complete. We have 2 or 3 that are mostly complete manuscripts from this time. So Codex Vaticanus, or sometimes designated with the uppercase B, this 4th century manuscript is widely acknowledged as being the most important witness of the New Testament text, kind of like the Dead Sea Scroll of the New Testament. This manuscript has been was located in the Vatican Library in Rome since 1481, but its contents were not made available to all until 1889. Around the end of the 19th century was when you have a lot of these different translations that use a different set of manuscripts based on these older manuscripts. It is rare that it in that it contains in Greek practically all of the Old and New Testaments. It does not include the pastoral epistles and Hebrews 9:15 through Revelation. In spite of its gaps, it is considered to be the most exact copy of the New Testament according to a certain theory. In a later video, we'll talk about the eclectic versus the majority text. Printed text of the Greek New Testament today rely heavily on the Codex Vaticanus, the modern text that we have, modern translations we have today. Then you have the Codex Sinaiticus, which is designated with the Hebrew letter Aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Codex Sinaiticus is a near equal to the Codex Vaticanus, or from the same textual family. It is also an important witness to the New Testament because of its age, accuracy, and completeness. It is known as Codex Sinaiticus because it was discovered by the great,